On June 1, 2009, an Airbus Aviation-changing carrying 220 people vanished over the Atlantic Ocean. Air France Flight 440-7 had departed from Rio de Janeiro and was headed to Paris. The flight was routine. The crew was experienced. The aircraft had no known major faults. Then, in the middle of the night over a remote stretch of ocean, the plane disappeared from radar. There was no distress call, only automated maintenance messages transmitted via satellite, brief, technical, and alarming. They indicated failures in airspeed measurement systems. Then silence. Within hours, search operations began. Brazilian and French military aircraft scanned thousands of square kilometers of open sea. Days later, debris was found floating. Parts of the fuselage, seats, personal belongings. There were no survivors, but the biggest question remained. How does a modern jetliner simply fall out of the sky? The first clue, faulty airspeed. The Airbus Aviation-changing relies on pitot tubes, small external sensors that measure airspeed by detecting air pressure. Investigators later determined that the pitot tubes likely iced over while the aircraft flew through a powerful equatorial thunderstorm system known as the Intertropical Convergence Zone. When the pitot tubes froze, the airspeed readings became unreliable. The aircraft's autopilot system disengaged automatically as designed. The flight control system switched from normal law to alternate law, reducing some automated protections. At that moment, the pilots had to fly manually, at night, in turbulence, without reliable speed data. The critical 4 minutes cockpit voice recorder data, recovered 2 years later from the ocean floor nearly 4.0 meters deep, revealed what happened next. The Codzan pilot, who was in control at the time, pulled back on the side Zan stick, raising the aircraft's nose. The plane began to climb rapidly. In thin air at high altitude, this was dangerous. As the nose went up, speed decreased further. The stall warning sounded. Instead of lowering the nose to regain speed, the pilots continued pulling back intermittently. Confusion filled the cockpit. One pilot asked, "What's happening?" Another said, "We've lost the speeds." The aircraft entered a full aerodynamic stall. At 30.0 feet, the aviation-changing hold cruised smoothly. But now it was climbing, losing speed, and then falling. For more than 3 minutes, the aircraft descended at approximately 10.0 feet per minute. A stall at high altitude requires one fundamental response: push the nose down to regain airflow over the wings. But the pilots appeared not to recognize they were in a sustained stall. At one point, one pilot said, "But I've had the stick back the whole time." That was the fatal mistake. The aircraft struck the ocean belly first at high vertical speed. All 228 people on board died instantly. Recovery from the deep. Finding the wreckage was another challenge. The crash site was in one of the deepest parts of the Atlantic. Initial searches failed. Black boxes were not immediately located. For nearly 2 years, the exact cause remained unknown. Finally, in 2011, a deep-sea search mission using advanced sonar and remotely operated vehicles located the wreckage field. The flight data recorder and cockpit voice recorder were recovered intact. The data confirmed what investigators suspected. Temporary loss of airspeed data triggered a chain of human errors. The human factor. The final report by France's Bureau d'Enquêtes d'Analyses B concluded that the crash was caused by a combination of temporary inconsistency between airspeed measurements, inappropriate pilot inputs, failure to recognize and correct a high-altitude stall. The aircraft itself was structurally sound. The engines were functioning normally until impact. There was no explosion, no terrorism, no structural breakup in flight. It was a stall, a basic aerodynamic condition taught in early flight training. But at high altitude, in darkness and turbulence, with alarms sounding and contradictory data flashing, the situation became overwhelming. The captain had been resting and returned to the cockpit only shortly before impact. By then, the aircraft was already in a deep stall. The stall warning even stopped sounding at one point because the airspeed data had become so inconsistent that the system no longer registered valid parameters. This may have further confused the crew. Industry impact. After the crash, airlines worldwide replaced older pitot tube models with improved versions less prone to icing. Training programs were revised to emphasize manual flying skills and high-altitude stall recovery. Investigators noted that many modern airline pilots had limited experience manually flying aircraft at high altitude without automation. Flight simulators were updated to include unreliable airspeed scenarios. The tragedy reshaped pilot training globally. The broader lesson: Air France 447 was not caused by a single catastrophic failure. It was a chain. Aviation-changing autopilot disconnect, aviation fusion, thondrin nose up input, sondrin stall, failure to recover. In aviation safety, accidents rarely stem from one mistake. They result from multiple small failures aligning at the worst possible moment. The crew faced a sudden technical problem in one of the most challenging flight environments on Earth, but the inability to diagnose the stall quickly proved fatal. Today, the accident is studied in aviation academies around the world. It stands as a stark reminder, even in the age of advanced automation, human understanding of basic flight principles remains critical. Straight to the point, the aircraft did not explode. It did not run out of fuel. It was not struck by lightning. It was not sabotaged. It stalled. For over 3 minutes, a modern jet fell from the sky because the nose remained too high. Air France 447 changed aviation. And it proved that in the cockpit, when automation fails, fundamentals decide survival. 228 lives were lost in 4 minutes. The ocean kept its silence. But the black boxes told the story.